times we look at church as a club. We do, and it's not. But for example, you've got two clubs. You've got PETA. You know, they're the ones that love the animals and they protect the animals. And you're going to one of these meetings, and you're discussing the panda bear, and you suddenly come up and say, well, you know, who you been dating lately? Or, you know, how are the grandkids? And you start pulling out your grandkids. Let's don't talk about your grandkids. Let's talk about the koala bear, you know? Because there's a reason there that they are together, and only for one reason. In fact, somebody were to come in and say, wow, you know, the panda bear is great, but man, look at this new gun I got. But, no, you don't belong here. You belong in the National Rifle Association meeting right down the hallway. You know, you don't belong here, okay? Because you don't have the same commonality that we have. Now, in churches, there's a church growth principle. If I can just regress for just a moment, because I think this is important. In fact, this really kind of defines the fellowship that I'm talking about. There's a church growth principle called the homogeneous unit principle. And it means this: birds of a feather flock together. Okay, and it's true. Birds of a feather flock together. So I would admit that whether we like that or not, it's true. But here's why it's true. Here's why it's true. Somebody would say, well, what we need to do is we need to have a church for the white collar, one for the blue collar, one for the red collar, one for the green collar, one for no collar. And we need to have people that have this kind of education, people that have this, and you know, another class or church that has this type of socioeconomic background, and another one over here, and we're just all kind of divided up based upon a commonality. And there's nothing wrong with being divided up over commonality. But the problem is we are divided up over the wrong thing, because what we're thinking about is we need to have things in common the way the rest of the world has something in common. For example, you can join a club and say, we're all white collar. You don't have to be a part of a church. There's nothing unique about it. You can say, well, we're all blue collar here. We're all no collar here. Well, you can join the NRA and be no collar. You can join a secular group. You can join the Cancer Society and say, well, we're all just blue collar here. There's no commonality to it. I love the illustration that D. Martin Lloyd Jones tells. And, you know, D. Martin Lloyd Jones, back in England, back in, I guess, first of the century or last century, was a physician and also a brilliant man. I don't have his commentary on Romans. It's because I just don't have time to read it. It's like this long. He would take a verse, one part of one verse, and make a whole book out of it. He took Psalm 42, I think it was, and wrote a whole book on just a couple of verses. Very, very intelligent, very in-depth type of individual. He's a physician, got called into the ministry. And he was called out to a fisherman type of church. And he thought to himself, what do I have in common with these people? You know, I'm going to be talking over their heads. I just don't know if I really have a commonality there that I can really talk to them about. But he said, much to his surprise, when he went there, and he'd go down to the docks, and he would talk to them. And he said they were just bonded. And he said the reason we were bonded is that we weren't talking about fishing. We were not talking about donuts. Now, he didn't say that. We weren't talking about fried chicken. We're not talking about what we're going to do Friday night. We were talking about Jesus. And that commonality bonded us together closer than any brothers or sisters that I could ever have. The problem with the church today, and the reason why we want to have the homogeneous unit principle, which is true. Yes, birds of a feather flock together. The gene is just the wrong thing. We're talking about genes as though the gene has to do with a job. The gene has to do with your background. The gene has to do with where your kids go to school. The gene has to do with Jesus. That's what it's all about.